Okay, so thank you, Melissa, for offering your project for us to work on for this. What I want to show you here is how to do a, a very simple, and we're going to keep it pretty simple, right? We're not going to get totally crazy with this, but how to do landscape elements, and more particularly, how to manage many of them. So the photoshopping process when you're doing something like this, where it's on a big tower, and you don't really, well, what am I trying to say? I guess you don't really have to do it in a great level of detail, right? Because you're so far away from the building, you're not really going to see much of the greenery that you're modeling into this thing. So you can generally look for more shrubs rather than trees, and then maybe offset it with a couple of elements that are similar to trees. So I just did like a quick Google for shrubs with a white background, or really it doesn't matter what color background it is, as long as you pick something that you can easily erase or use multiply on. You could also do black backgrounds as well. Those are really easy to do multiply on, and then you can just get rid of everything behind it. But anyway, there are a few ways of doing it, but let's just grab something real quick and just go with it. So I'm going to grab something that looks like it's going to sort of fill out the levels pretty well, and just kind of go from there. So I think something like this is probably appropriate because I'm going to make it small. I'm going to stretch it out across the whole level, and then clip it and stuff like that. So let's, and I know I'm sort of, ripping this one, but it's going to be so small that the actual element doesn't really matter. I don't need to purchase this one because it's not going to, anyway, it's not really going to matter. So what we want is to, you can clip this image. And this is for the low budget school student doing this, by the way. If you're getting paid for your work, you're going to want to buy this image. Okay. Anyway, so copy this and we can drop it into Photoshop and we can work on it here. Okay, there's a number of things that we can do to it. Namely, I think for most applications, it's totally fine for you to just use the magic wand to get rid of the white background in this application. And I say in this application, meaning the thing is going to be so small that you won't really need to get exactly the right edge. So anyway, let's just do a quick magic wand on that. You can do something like that and then delete everything that's on the outside. Okay. So, I mean, generally speaking, that works pretty well for us for this purpose. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to actually apply it to one of our floors. I'm going to pick one that's kind of in the middle first, because that's going to be the most direct relationship. So with that element, notice how it comes up on a layer down here, right? Eventually we're going to want to group this because there will be a bunch of them. But let's right click and do a free transform. You don't have to do much. You just grab the element by doing free transform as long as you have that layer selected. And then we're going to just place it and make it really, really small. Right? You're hardly even going to see this thing. Let's apply that transformation. And when you get down into it, I mean, look at how much the resolution gets messed up. So you don't really need, I mean, you can sort of self-generate using your paint tools, something that's similar to it if you really wanted to spend the time, but it's not all that critical. Similarly, the actual elements that we're dropping in here, they're not, what am I trying to say? It's not critical to keep them even in the same resolution, meaning like we can stretch it because it's not really going to affect the actual rendering of the element itself because of how low resolution the element is, right? So I'm going to stretch it across the whole floor like that, all right? This is definitely going to be a laborious process. So depending on how much and what types of foliage you're going to put on each of your floors, you might have to spend a little bit less or a little bit more time on this, appropriately to get it to look kind of right, okay? So what I want to point out here is that there are certain parts of this layer that are going to look different ways, okay? So the one that's sort of hanging out and is exposed is going to be more saturated, less translucent, and the one that's going to be on the right is going to be modified so that it looks like it's coming through the glass, Okay, so that's a very, very important distinction. One of the things that I want to do, which is especially important, is I want to create two separate layers. So I'm going to right-click my my background, and I'm going to duplicate that. Duplicate layer. Okay, and I'm going to put this on top. And there's a good reason why I'm doing that. The reason why I'm putting that on top is because if I turn this off, and let's say I need to get rid of everything that's not going to be seen at all. So I'm using my lasso tool on the wrong layer. Hang on. I'm going to use my lasso tool. Why is it not selecting? Oh, because this is the wrong, I thought I was on polygon lasso tool. Let's do this. Oh, one other thing, just a cautionary measure. Before you start modifying a source image that you're going to use, it's a good idea to duplicate it and keep the original. So I'm going to right-click this layer, duplicate it, and I'm going to call this original shrub. I'll put that at the bottom and turn it off. So what I'm trying to do here is get rid of this element right here, which is definitely not going to be seen at all, and get rid of that. Okay, so that's one step. I'm also going to get rid of this one over here. Get rid of that. Okay, so really the effect I'm going for is to have that one that's on the left be different than the one that's on the right. And the reason I'm doing two layers of this is so that I can separate the layers that they're on. So I'm going to real quickly just kind of grab this thing. I'm going to say copy and paste. Drop it back into the place that it's in. And I'm going to call this exposed foliage shrub. And then the other one is going to be, let's call this glazed foliage shrub. Okay, so on the exposed foliage shrub, I don't need this. On the glazed foliage shrub, whoops. Oh, what did I do? Did I have them both on? I think I had them both on. Hang on. There we go. All right, exposed foliage shrub, turn that on, turn this off. I'm going to get rid of that on this guy. There. Okay, so now they're on two separate layers. The reason I did that is so I can select everything outside of the shrub right there, or rather, and then I can inverse it, and that's going to select all the shrubs, right? So even if I have multiples, so let's do a couple multiples on this. I'm going to duplicate this, and duplicate again. So the workflow is you're going to grab these elements and just kind of drop them in where you want to show them. And you can nudge them, whatever you want to do to get them to work efficiently for you. Okay, so that's one set of them. So the important part is once all of those things are set and placed, you can merge the exposed foliage ones, and I'm going to just do it with these ones right here. I'm going to merge all of those into one. So they're all on one layer. So now when I do my wand tool on the outside, I say select inverse, and now those elements are selected. So when I go back to my overlay layer, that's this one, I can delete that selection, and then it shows through. Okay, so the first step in deviating the inside from the outside is to just cut everything that wants to be a different rendering out of it from the ones that are going to be, and that's those that are on the inside. So I only have one as an example right now, but the key is now I have this layer 1 copy that's my overlay layer. So let me name that appropriately. Overlay layer. If I change the opacity here to something like 50%, I can look at it differently than the other setting. So let's make it more like 30. Okay. So that's how you start to get it to sort of disappear behind the glazing a little bit. Is that helpful? That's just one layer, though. I mean, there are a bunch of different things that you can do. You can also go back into that layer itself, and once you have a bunch of them, let's just kind of drop a few on there. And you're probably going to want some, you know, variation between them, but I'm just going to duplicate a couple more. Let's kind of drag that one up a little bit. See, I should have clipped these all together because of that problem, but really what you want to do is you want to take the original up and then modify the original in time with the rest. So actually, let me just kind of do it this way. Well, let me take care of that later, actually. Do another one here, drag that up. I know these floor levels are sort of on different levels, each one. They don't perfectly align with the glazing. So here's what I'm going to do for this one to correct it. I'm going to merge them. I'm going to clip this off because it's all going to get skewed behind the glass anyway. I'm hardly even going to see it. And then I'm going to free transform on that, and I'm going to use Control to skew it a certain way. That's going to let me kind of stretch it, but also stretch it sort of in the downward direction on one side. All right, so that's sort of getting me there. I can continue to use the lasso tool if I want. I can, you know, start to trim this off so that it. There are a bunch of things I could do. I'm not going to do it all right now, but you just keep trimming it till a point where it looks like it kind of relates to that floor, right? But the other thing that I want to do particularly with this one is I want to blur it out because it's behind frosted glass, and I want to make sure that the edges are really soft so that I don't have any hard edges really distracting me from the fact that this doesn't exactly hit the edge of the building, right? Like right now, even if I put my overlay layer on, I can still see on the right-hand side that, and right and left sides, that it's like a strict edge. And that's not what I want. Let's turn that off. So I'm going to retrim this here just to kind of make it look a little bit more appropriate to what I was going for. Delete that. And I'm also going to trim this a little short. Delete that. Okay, so I'm going to do and make sure that you have that layer selected, but we go to blur, we can do a Gaussian blur, and you just keep increasing the amount of blur till it gets to a point where it kind of looks like, if you were to look at it behind frosted glass, that's what it would look like if it was a very translucent frosted glass. Right, so I think that's probably appropriate. Oh, you know what I want to do first? Before I do that, I want to select the inverse of everything, and then I'm going to do what's called a feather. So I'm going to go to Select, Modify, let's go to Feather. And what that's going to do is, you see the dotted line that's going around each of these elements? Well, that dotted line is an exact traced edge to the pixel. If I feather the selection, it actually blurs the selection by a certain number of pixels on either side. So I think that this is a fairly low resolution, so I'm only going to feather it by 1, and then I'm going to go in and erase around it. Just make that kind of big there. So I'm going to erase around it to soften up those edges, and I don't think that that was very much. Let's go back, and back, and feather it a little more. Up to 5. And if you want to really feather on one side a little bit more than the others, that could be appropriate too. Okay, so see how that really softened it up a little bit around the edges? That could be helpful depending on what your application is. So I'm going to go back into my Gaussian blur. I'll show you the menu again just so you can see it. But 2.9 is what I arrived at before, so I'm going to leave it at 2.9. Turn on my overlay layer, and now you can really hardly see it at all, but it really speaks to the fact that there is greenery inside of this building. Let's modify that a little more. You can see a little more of it. And the other thing I think that I wanted to point out real quick is this element right here. The clipping of hard edges you generally want to do after you do blurring effects, because the blurring effects will blur around the hard edge. So that's a key distinction. So I'm doing this now on that. Yeah, there you go. Well, probably should have done it more on the inside. Let's go back here. It's difficult though, because sometimes you clip out too much and you can sort of see it around the edge. Oh, shoot. Select, reselect. There. Okay. Is that helpful to see? So generally you don't want to show all of your foliage in full saturation. Like if you see that on the edge for all of them, it's going to be a little bit distracting. You probably want to A, vary it up and have different types of foliage. You don't want the same thing copy and pasted down on every floor. And B, it also helps to just soften it up a little bit by using translucencies. Let me drop a background white. So I'll fill this in with white in the background. And I'm just going to drop the opacity a little bit on this layer. Oh, sorry, wrong layer. I guess that background doesn't really matter. So you just drop the opacity a little bit so that it still feels like it's more of an object than what's on the inside, but it's not overwhelming to the eye in saturation when you see it on the building itself. What do you guys think? Good, bad, ugly? No. All right. Well, what's that?
The inner one is very slight difference.
Oh yeah. No, it's extremely subtle, but I mean you can tell. Yeah. It really speaks to the entourage that you can tell a little bit that it's slightly populated, right? It doesn't have to be extreme. In fact, you could just take your paint tool and you could just put a little green swath inside and do the same thing. You don't even have to use foliage at all. I just chose to for this exercise. Okay. So the other thing I guess that I wanted to show you is if you can find good foliage with black background, let's do tree black background. Let's grab I'm trying to find one that's not proprietary because technically it's not allowed, but this one I guess we'll do. Let's clip that one in. But we're students, so we can get away with it. Copy, put it in here. The cool thing about, oops, on top of that layer. The cool thing about black background images, if you can find them, they're less common, but you can very easily just go into, I forget which layer, screen, yeah. If you set it to screen, it pretty much does all the work for you. Anything that's black is going to go away, and then all of the dark tones of the image are going to go away as well. So you just set it to screen, and then you can free transform, and you can place it wherever you want to place it. So if you're going to have trees on this thing, oh, that's right, it's too light. I forgot. Hang on. Well, no, because it's not going to do it for that one. Shoot. Might not work in this case. Yeah. No. I thought screen would just cut it out, but I guess not. Darn. Oh well. I'm not the Photoshop expert. But anyway, you could do the same thing with color selection. If you just grab your, if you grab that right there, you just go to select, you do color range, and really doesn't matter when it's exactly black. It doesn't matter all that much. You just hit OK, hit delete, and it's gone. So that also cuts out, that will also cut out everything that's inside of the tree as well, which is very, very important. If you can cut out everything inside of the tree versus what we did last time where we just took the magic wand tool and we cut everything outside, right? You still get these little black patches on the inside. It's not the end of the world, but it's helpful, I think. It looks a little better to do it with the color range selection. Whoops, wrong layer. Select, color range, that, okay. Delete, there. I mean, that looks better to me. What do you think?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's magic.
I know.
I never knew that tool.
I don't know about you, but I'm really excited about it. Want to know why I'm excited about it? Because I'm excited to see you all use it. Yeah. 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 A little corny, but that's all right. Anyway, so let me just finish this off by dropping a tree in here because I feel like it's obligatory now. Free transform. Drop this guy over here. Make him really, really small. Kind of put him out on the ledge there. Is it unrealistic? I don't know. You tell me.
It's okay.
So we're going to drop the opacity of this guy. Okay, wait, I do have one more thing. I know this is a lot, and this is getting to be a really long video. It's just, you need to make sure that it's clean, because we have all these different layers. So what I suggest is, if you have shrubs, if you have trees, whatever the case is, just grab stuff like foliage, like shrubs, and then once you select all of those layers, hit the little, you can't really see it, but it's a folder button all the way down here. Looks like a file folder. Click that, and it's going to make a group for them. Oh, it didn't auto-drop them in. All right, anyway, you select them and drop them onto group, and then call it shrubs. And then you can collapse all of your shrubs, and you can turn all of your shrubs off at once, if you choose. You can do the same thing for the tree layer. Let's call this tree A. Boom. And we'll make a folder for that. We'll call this one trees. And drop that in there. Okay, so that's just like another measure of fixing it up. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints?
Yeah, I got a complaint. That tree though.
What's wrong with the tree?
I don't know, Kevin.
You don't believe that it looks real?
Yeah, like
Well,
oh.
I mean, it looks funky here. Well, yeah, it is kind of small. It's only a 12-foot. The downside of this is you wouldn't typically put a tree in this one because with it only being 12 to 15 feet, you're not going to get much of a tree. So if you have a sky lobby, that would be the place to put trees. If you really want to stretch it, I suppose we could do like, I don't know if this will work with a black background. It's a stalk, right, to get the whole plant? That's not really a corn stalk. Well, yeah, there we go. You could do something like this. Let's copy that. Drop it into Photoshop. And then we're going to do a... I don't think that's going to be enough. We're going to have to do color range on this guy. So select that. Select. We'll do color range. I don't want to select that stuff. Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. Then you can get rid of that tree that you don't like. And then I can drop this guy onto one of these levels instead.
That's what I'm talking about, Kevin. She got the small levels.
There you go. Is that better?
I like it.
Okay, let's duplicate that.
I'd rather not say it. I'll talk about it first.
Okay, so something like that, you probably would want to take one of your shrubs and get some of the green element from the lower level, and maybe just, I don't know which shrub level that's on. That's exposed foliage, copy paste, drop this down, put it in there so that it kind of fills it out a little bit. Something like that, right? Doesn't take very long to do. It will take very long to do if you have 100 floors, so I suggest do do your copy and paste in like a big row. Like basically just go to Google, grab all the different types of foliage you want, copy them in, and make a base layer for each one. Then you duplicate it, move it in place, make it really small, get it the way you want it, and then do your duplications of each of the smaller level items from there. Does that make sense? All right, let's close this video.